So this topic is really about connected planning, which is really an advantage that Anaplan holds over other solutions that are in the space that you might be considering either now or in the future. So let's dive into a little bit of detail about that. And this is really about illustrating one advantage of Anaplan. Next week is going to be another one. Let's talk about the traditional state of planning, if you will. Planning has typically occurred in silos. Sales has a silo, supply chain has a silo, HR has a silo, finance has a silo, et cetera. And really, people have planned within their silo and maximized the planning result or planning situation or planning assumptions for their particular silo. They maximize it basically. And that's really just natural under a silo environment where that's the only set of information that you have. You may have some awareness of what the management team wants to achieve from an organizational point of view, but that may not necessarily translate into what specifically you would need to do. So it's really just everybody kind of maximizing the plan for their group, right? Because obviously there's, in a siloed environment, there's very little information sharing, and there's really no awareness of the interdependencies and impacts. Planning may occur in decision making and so on may occur in a silo, but in reality, all parts of the organization are connected and are impacted by one another, and that really plays out in terms of reality, in terms of the actual day-to-day operations of the organization. And a siloed planning process really ignores those interdependencies. In a lot of cases, it's really a lack of systems that lead to that siloed approach, because the systems are too different. They're not talking to each other. And, if they do, it's really through Excel. And there's also a limited ability to operationalize the organizational strategy and goals in terms of how that translates into what I would need to do specifically to meet those organizational objectives. And really those goals have a cross-functional impact across the organization. There's also a disconnect typically between the top and the bottom, in a siloed environment, in terms of not being able to translate those goals in terms of what you would need to do specifically, and how that might impact others across the organization that will ultimately have another impact on you, on your group as well. There's just no visibility into that. There's also, in a siloed environment, typically a proliferation of disconnected point solutions, where finance will go out and find a financial planning product. Supply chain will go out and find a demand planning, supply planning, S&OP solution. HR will go out and find a workforce planning solution. Sales will go out and find a territory and quota or sales forecasting or incentive compensation tool. And so you end up with this, in a siloed environment, a proliferation of these disconnected tools, which further seeks to reinforce the siloed approach. And they're all disconnected. And if you ever needed to try to find a way to bring them together, it's typically done through Excel. And I would ask this question, like, in a disconnected, siloed point solution world, how would you actually go about generating scenarios in that particular environment? It can be a very challenging process, because each one of those point solutions has different structures, metadata dimensions, etc., metrics, and so on, different data requirements, different user community, different needs, etc. And so it's very hard to kind of bring all that together. What that really leads to is what is commonly referred to as the messy middle. Here's an example of this, where you have different organizational groups, having to plan at both a strategic and operational level. And what that leads to is this proliferation of Excel workbooks attempting to connect these disconnected solutions together, all at different levels of detail. And it just leads to this messy middle of, all these different spreadsheets trying to bring everything together, and nobody really knowing who's got the latest version and everything else. And think about trying to do versions around that. leads to a lot of, I would say, confusion and suboptimal results, as a result of using Excel in a way that was really never designed for. Let's talk about what connected planning brings and really what connected planning is, because it's a term that is often used and coined by Anaplan, but there's an assumption out there that people know what it means. But really, connected planning is all about connecting people, plans, and data to better align, collaborate, break down silos, share information, connect upstream and downstream impacts, and perform upstream and downstream scenario planning, and really all about being able to make more informed planning decisions. Because when you connect those silos when you connect those groups together, bring them into one single platform, it opens up a whole new world in terms of knowledge of the upstream and downstream impacts on your group, as well as the decisions that you make potentially on other groups, and provides more visibility from between the top and the bottom as well, so that it leads to a greater understanding of the interdependencies and the business drivers that allow you to then unlock greater value within your organization. And that's really what connected planning brings. So let's step into an example of this in terms of how it actually works. So what I've got here is an example of a connected planning demo. And I'm just going to start by going through this honeycomb, which really will illustrate for you the process that we're going to go through. In this example, we're going to bring together, ERP information and CRM information into the Anaplan platform. We're then going to perform as finance a long-range planning exercise, and how that also translates into revenue and OpEx planning. Then we're going to put our sales hat on and actually then translate those financial plans into a quota for the sales force, and how that leads to territory planning as well as incentive compensation planning. And so what we've done in this example is really connected two very different groups together in one single platform. If you think about how finance thinks and how finance works, and you think about how sales thinks and how sales works, two very different groups. But what you're going to see in this example is that those two groups can work together on the Anaplan platform and really drive greater value, and be able to perform like an end-to-end planning process, connecting them together such that the outputs and decisions of one group flow in as inputs into the other group to help them make their planning decisions as well. And that's really one of the core advantages of the Anaplan platform, is being able to connect different groups together. And if you expand this example to include, okay, well, there's going to be a workforce, there's going to be an HR impact, there's going to be a marketing impact, there's going to be a supply chain impact. Think about connecting all those groups together in a single end-to-end connected planning platform. It becomes extremely powerful. And in today's world of focusing on expense management, expense optimization and reduction, having that end-to-end visibility is critical to be able to make the optimal decisions for your organization. By having that end-to-end visibility is critical. Trying to do that in a point solution disconnected world is going to lead to suboptimal incomes. So let's go through this. So let's now go ahead and take a look at setting some top-down targets. So now we've got our finance hats on. And also keep in mind, as I go through this, just look at the different dashboards that you're seeing and how different groups can use Anaplan to visualize the data that they would need and the level of granularity that they would need in the way they want to work, and how Anaplan is able to address the needs of those disparate groups, but yet being connected together. So in this case, from a finance point of view, we have a dashboard that has the ability to do like cascading long-range planning, where essentially you have like different product categories, and we've got access to prior year revenue, which has come from our ERP system. We've got the ability to enter things like percentage changes or absolute dollar changes, and being able to set a revenue target. And for a given product category, you can see that there are different product families. So this is like a multi-level planning example, where essentially we can go into this, let's say this last product here, and put in like a 17% growth rate, and immediately Anaplan takes that prior year revenue, applies that growth rate, and then gives us our revenue target. And you'll also notice too that there's a capacity warning that has occurred. If we're going to increase revenue, here's your first interdependent impact. You're going to need more quota-carrying sales representatives to go out and get that revenue. And right now, we're kind of at capacity in our sales organization. So if we want more revenue, we've got to get more salespeople. And so this is that first indication of that, or the benefit of that connected planning, where you can be alerted to downstream impacts of decisions that you're making, so that you can then go ahead and take corrective action. So maybe we need to add a couple of additional headcounts or whatever as a result of this. So we have the ability to, first of all, Anaplan has the ability to monitor those cross-functional impacts and give you that alert directly in the dashboard, in real time. And you can then decide, that despite that, you want to go ahead and proceed, because that baton is now going to be passed to the sales organization to determine, we now have 2 open headcount or whatever that's been added. We can then start assigning those open headcounts in terms of regions and so on. So we can go ahead and proceed with this. And then within a given category, you also have the ability to, go a level down and decide if you want to hold or override those changes. Now that upper level target has automatically been translated down into like a final goal, and you can do individual holds and overrides on this as well, and either hold that amount or even override it and see that impact. So you have the ability to do that. And then for this particular category, if we want to go ahead and say, we want to push this family a little bit further, we're going to override that to 120,000. We can easily do that, and you can see that the charts are dynamically updating, as a result of that. And again, that's another advantage of Anaplan, is it's a real-time in-memory engine, such that any decisions made upstream automatically cascade all the way downstream, and you can immediately see those impacts. And you also have the ability to do that very easy scenario modeling, where you can model out a base case, an upside and a downside scenario, or best case, worst case, most probable. You can have an unlimited number of scenarios within Anaplan, and and in a disconnected, siloed point solution world, using Excel as the go-between, it's going to be extremely challenging to model those scenarios as well. So let's go ahead and we're just going to do this as our base case scenario. And then we can go ahead and say, okay, well, this looks pretty good. We can go ahead and lock that long range plan. So we're going to lock that and distribute it out to the rest of the organization. And now we're going to go ahead and look at, some targets in terms of how that annual operating plan is going to translate into that next level, which would be like the individual brand level. And so in this case here, if we just pick, an individual brand as an example, so I'll just go up and I'll select this brand here, and, we'll focus on Q2. You'll notice here that in the prior example, we just did like year-over-year growth rates. Now what we can do is actually break this down to a quarterly level, where Anaplan has automatically taken that annual target and spread it by quarter based on different seasonal patterns. And you'll notice here that we actually have a warning around increasing headcount or productivity. So here's another example of that, or cross-functional impacts, that we can actually start, taking a look and seeing sort of what that means. And first of all, we can actually even operationalize our targets a little bit further by setting individual targets by brand. We can immediately see that we have a sub-region headcount numbers. So required to meet the target, we need 69 FTEs. So again, Anaplan has automatically determined, based on that growth rate, what the potential required FTEs are to meet that, and whether we're potentially short. And we have already that second cross-functional warning that says, well, wait a second, based on the target you've specified, you actually need to increase headcount or increase productivity. How are you going to do it? And so, we could put like a 10% productivity increase in, and immediately you can see that warning has been cleared. So again, it's that cross-functional upstream, downstream modeling that Anaplan provides, end to end through those different silos, to immediately inform you of any alerts as a result of those upstream decisions. And again, you could even look at potentially changing your utilization percentage as well to clear that alert. And also too, you have the ability to decide how you want to seasonalize things. Here's your final target number. You could decide to say, well, I want this to be, spread a different pattern. You could pick those different seasonal patterns and so on, and then ultimately, push those out. But that's really just a quick example of a high-level FP&A goal setting, target setting process, and dealing with, different warnings that might occur as a result of that, because Anaplan's aware of the downstream impacts and also the interdependent impacts across the different groups within the organization. And again, this is just one example of how you can plan using Anaplan. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put our sales hat on, and now look at what this means from a sales point of view, because finance has changed the targets, and now sales has to react. In a siloed point solution, disconnected world, it's going to be very hard for sales to translate that to specific operational objectives that they're going to have. Sales, what does sales think about, right? Well, sales is all about, understanding what accounts you have and across what industries and regions, and things like total addressable markets and potential spend and account segmentation and scoring, and then taking those accounts, racking and stacking them and rating them, and then assigning those accounts out to the sales force with goals or attainment goals or quotas and so on that they're now going to work to achieve in their assigned accounts. Sales really isn't thinking about the financial side of the business, right? They're thinking about revenue and, really sales, which then ultimately translates into revenue. But they're just looking at quarterly performance, attainment percentage. What's the objective? Have I met my goal or not? Being the feet on the ground in their assigned accounts for their customers, the eyes and ears of the organization in their customer base, and scouring for those new opportunities and winning that business, which is a very different mindset to finance. So ultimately, you can feed in CRM level information, account level information into Anaplan. And again, this is a very different dashboard that you saw to finance, right? Now we're looking at account level information. So you can take that CRM feed into Anaplan. So Anaplan can house not only your financial results from your ERP system, those prior year numbers that then you can use Anaplan to plan based off of. You can also feed in CRM level information for sales to help them do their job as well. But again, single platform, very different data sets, very different dimensions, very different data, very different needs, but all being serviced by Anaplan. So you can bring in all that historical CRM level information. And then from here, we can then go ahead and look at bringing sales and finance together. So here's how this works. Finance on the left is really thinking about revenue by geography. Sales on the right is thinking about, sales by their different product lines, different lines of business and so on, by their different regions. So how do we go ahead and bring these things together? Well, in Anaplan, what you're able to do is have both those groups together and have Anaplan perform the translation. And it's really, and sometimes, these groups are even speaking like different languages, right? Because you have the language of sales, you got the language of finance. Anaplan can perform that translation and align those different groups so that they're now basically speaking about the same numbers, but in a different breakdown, if you will. You'll notice here that from finance point of view, again, we're just looking at finance by geography, right? And if we look at, for North America, we're at like $1.8 billion. If we then take a look at what this means for sales for North America, again, I've got the Americas here. And now what Anaplan does is it takes that number and breaks it down into a product and category level of detail so that you can immediately see that sales is now aligned to those financial targets, but in the way that it makes sense for sales to the way that sales understands or processes information, right? Because they're not thinking about, well, the regional type stuff, they're just thinking about now, or sort of the finance perspective, they're thinking about now, okay, here's what I need to get out of or my different product lines for my different territories to be able to align to those financial targets. So Anaplan has performed that translation of the point of view from finance into sales. And now sales can take these numbers, which are aligned to finance, but in the way that sales wants to look at things, and take those going forward. So now let's move into like account analysis. So now what you've got is from a regional vice president perspective, they can then start assigning quotas to their teams. And in this case, we have a regional, a sub-region, and a field level in terms of planning. And again, we've got prior year sales history by product. We've got the growth rates. Again, these growth rates have been translated from the finance point of view, so we can understand, like, from a product point of view and from a territory point of view, what we need to achieve to align to those financial targets. We can also understand other metrics around, like, our market share, whether there's, what our total addressable market is, what that finance target is, what that sales target is. Notice that those two numbers now, those agree, right? And again, that's all about, through connected planning, the ability to align those groups. And then ultimately we can put in some adjustments, and we can put in over assignments, right? To assign those targets to the region, put in an over assignment to the sub-region. And really what these are buffers, right? Because ultimately what we want to do is award quotas or give quotas to our sales team. And so as an RVP, we can actually put in some over assignments to kind of provide that bit of a buffer, right? So that the real number we need to hit is here, but we want to motivate our team to overachieve. And so we can put in those over assignments, but now we're moving more into like a territory and quota setting process, which is very different than that financial target setting process. Then we can actually take these goals, and operationalize them a little bit further. So we can break that down into like a regional level. And we can also determine like how we want to allocate these quotas, right? Do we want to do it based on prior year sales? Do we want to do it based on total addressable market? Do we want to just do a blended rate where we apply weightings to the different methods? Or do we want to base it just purely on predictive spend? And, we can talk about predictive spend, but that's really using some advanced capabilities from Anaplan to understand in their key strategic accounts, like what people are looking for. And ultimately, Anaplan is able to provide a predictive spend number rather than just relying on the historical approach of looking at total addressable market and market share and so on. So you can use predictive spend. You can even use a blended approach to set those targets, and then put in things like holds and overrides as well. And you can even apply workflow where you can actually signify that, okay, these look pretty good for the sub-region, so we're going to lock those targets. And then we can move into the sub-region where we can actually then cascade that down a little further, put in additional holds and overrides. Notice we're getting even more granular. And we can also see like how many sales reps we have, how many territories we have, and how many accounts are in each one of these regions, or these sub-regions, if you will. And we can go ahead and mark that as complete. And then even move into like a capacity analysis, right? Because you'll notice earlier that we had that capacity warning. And because we decided to proceed and set those targets, that immediately opened up true approved headcount for sales. And again, now we're moving a little bit into the HR function, where essentially we've got approved headcount. We can go ahead and actually release that headcount, but also deciding where we want to put those people. And what Anaplan's automatically done is, based on the potential of these different territories, it's recommended that we put like one enterprise, one person in enterprise and one person in, let's say, the key roles. So there's our two headcount. You can see that Anaplan's automatically reduced the remaining heads to add. And we can also have the quotas translated over as well. But now what we're going to do is go ahead and release that headcount. So now we're adding 2 headcount to our sales organization, and we can immediately see what the cost of that in terms of incremental salary, incremental variable costs, and so on. And also immediately see, where those people have been added as well. And also the details in terms of like, is there any coverage gap, any uncovered total addressable market, and so on. And then ultimately go and start making sure, or allocating our account executives to those territories that have that, that uncovered TAM, if you will. But again, just being able, and you'll notice that even, this exercise is very different than the financial target setting process, right? But again, this is how sales is able to use Anaplan to work in the way they want to work. And you'll notice here that on this particular dashboard, we have things like productivity adjustments. We have a gap between our target and our projected capacity. And so we can start putting in like adjustments for productivity, right? So maybe we can try to get more, by changing sort of how we work and potentially try to close that gap between the target and our available capacity by Q4. And you can also indicate like ramping profiles as well in terms of how long it's going to take people to get up to speed. And you can also identify those or set those ramping parameters, if you will. And you'll also notice that here's our 2 headcount, and here's when they've been predicted to start. And what you can also do is say, well, we need to close this gap a little bit further. We've got a key account executive that's starting here. We think maybe that they could potentially adopt a faster ramping profile. Maybe both of these potentially would, we could put them through some additional enablement to kind of close that gap a little bit further, and even potentially even start them back, even earlier, right? So maybe we want to bring them on, let's say, a month earlier, and what would the impact of that be, right? But you'll notice that we're able to do some what if scenarios here very quickly, just by changing the ramping profile, changing the start date, and immediately seeing how that impacts on our ability to deliver that target. So again, this is how sales likes to work in the level of granularity, and they're able to use Anaplan to do that, while at the same time being aligned to a completely different group with their own needs as well. And then also, finally, looking from a comp plan perspective, it's all about motivating your people, right? And so you'll notice that we have a target gap right now as well. And I'll just focus on the Americas here. And we have the ability to look at, things from a different scenario perspective, right? And in this case, right now, our base case is no different than, our what if case. And if we wanted to try to get more people kind of under the curve, maybe we want to look at, well, if, we have different tiers of comp plan, right, with different accelerators. And so here we have a 10% accelerator and a 20% accelerator. Well, what if we wanted to change things up a bit and put in like a 50% accelerator, to put kind of more people under that curve? Because you'll notice that you have your high performers here, and then you have like underachievers here. What we want to do is get more people in this sort of payout area. And you'll notice just by changing the accelerator that we might cost ourselves an extra $3 million in commission, but we're actually going to get $23 million more in sales. And if we do that also for our next tier of comp plan, maybe we want to put this in at like 1.5, you'll notice that we can even change that a little bit further. So now we're on the compensation modeling side, which is still part of sales, but also a different requirement, if you will, but being able to use Anaplan to do that. So this is just a quick example of how you can utilize Anaplan to enable connected planning within your organization, to break down those silos, to get people aligned, to allow them to still work the way they want to work with their own data and calculations and requirements and so on, but being able to connect them together, share information, and really open up that end-to-end visibility and transparency, and that which leads to a more optimal outcome in terms of your planning within your organization. And I'd like to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mark. There are a few questions here in the chat for you. So with so many point solutions out there, what are the advantages of Anaplan?
Yeah, there certainly are a lot of point solutions out there. And really the difference between Anaplan and a point solution is the platform approach. A point solution does something very well and does it very deep, but it does one thing and does one thing very well. And potentially the same company might have another bolt-on, like have another product that acts as a bolt-on, but it's still, again, a disconnected world, because that bolt-on does one thing and does it very well, does it very deep, but it doesn't have that platform capability. So ultimately, if you want to aspire to connected planning and unlock more value within your organization, you're going to have to connect those in some way. And in those cases, it's Excel. And now you're back in that messy middle, which is really what you should be trying to get away from.
Yeah, exactly. So this person asked, connected planning seems ambitious. Can we still implement Anaplan even if we don't have the supporting data for connected planning?
Yeah, I mean, connected planning is definitely ambitious. And really what you've seen is an example of a possible end state, or the art of the possible, right? But let's talk about the here and now, because the here and now is, you're probably trying to break out of those silos, right? And in the here and now, maybe you just need something for finance, or maybe you need something just for workforce, or something for marketing or sales. So Anaplan not only allows you to aspire to the desired end state, or the art of the possible, but also addresses the needs of the here and now, because you don't have to implement the connected planning all at once, right? You can implement Anaplan in a modular fashion, where you solve your most pressing challenges, that low-hanging fruit first, and then you go on to the next use case and you connect those together. So you are enabled for connected planning with Anaplan, but you don't have to do it right away. You can solve your most pressing challenges now, in the here and now.
Okay, so I think that's a really great segue for the next question. And it says, what if different groups are at different levels of planning maturity?
Yeah, I mean, that's, and typically we see that, right? And Anaplan, because it's a platform, because it's something that's very configurable and flexible and agile, it allows you to match the level of maturity for the groups that are planning, right? So, sales could be at a very sort of a lower level of maturity, or a high level of maturity, and supply chain could be at a low level of maturity, and finance at high maturity. What you're able to do is implement Anaplan for the needs of those groups, and because they're at the level of maturity that they're at, so you can match it and help them evolve in the future towards higher levels of maturity. But what you've put in place is that foundational platform that is going to connect them together and allow you to unlock incredible amounts of value as you add incremental use cases.
Great. And so that's also a great follow-up question, is what areas of the organization can be connected with Anaplan?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, all of the areas within your organization can be connected using Anaplan, because Anaplan is a platform. So if you have needs in finance, Anaplan can be implemented for the finance team. Anaplan can be implemented for sales, for marketing, for IT, for supply chain, for HR, and really it's implemented for the specific needs of those groups. But because it's on a platform, you're able to, when you're ready, to connect those together and really just get that end-to-end planning process.
Right. And so the last one is from an Excel lover. Why would someone who knows and loves working in Excel switch to Anaplan?
Yeah, I think the word switch is, I guess really what I'm talking about is making sure that you use the right tool for the right job. Are you going to turn off Excel and turn in your licenses? No. Excel still has a role, but let's make sure that Excel is being used for the right role within your organization, and not trying to be something, or trying to be used for something that it's never was designed for, which is to connect disparate systems together and to try to do connected planning in an Excel world. So Excel still has a role with Anaplan. As a matter of fact, Anaplan has an Excel add-in, and Anaplan deployment is being used for the role that was meant for, which is really that ad hoc type of reporting and analysis and so on. Even though Anaplan has its own reporting capabilities, there is still typically a role for Excel. And but again, it's being used in the right way, in the way that was designed for, not trying to be a patchwork solution for bringing disparate systems together. Let Anaplan do that heavy lifting and use Excel for what it was meant for.
Right, because usually we see, you can't have the visibility or the granularity of data with Excel that you can with Anaplan. So I know we see that a lot with our clients.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Mark, so much. And be sure to like this series on YouTube. We're going to be uploading every week. So Mark is going to add on to his topics next time. So be sure to join us, and we'll see you next time.